Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. In my previous video, I have hinted at the Russian response towards the West allowing Ukraine to use its long-range missiles to hit targets inside of Russia. Nonetheless, the Russian response came from Dimitry Medvedev. It's a very strong response, but before we get into the meat and potatoes, I just want to tell you a little something. You see, in Russia, people don't care about optics. Maybe there are certain people who are really careful about optics, packaging, the exterior, but the vast majority of people, and that includes the politicians, they don't care about how things look. They just care about what things are. No one is really concerned with how the cookie looks, the aesthetics of it. People just care how the cookie tastes, right? Because it's a cookie, you're supposed to eat it. You're not supposed to look at it. That's the mindset of the Russians, and that's always been their mindset. For us in the West, this is very, very difficult to understand because we are very focused on how things look. Oh, I'm not going to say that because I might hurt someone's feelings. Or I need to be careful with how I say this or that or the other. To the point where we dilute the language so much, nothing means nothing anymore. You read something and it's just empty talk. It's just empty words. I think this is a trap that we've set for ourselves many, many years ago when we decided to take it on this path. But you see, the Russians, they don't have this problem. They don't care if they're rude, if they hurt your 𝗵𝗶s. They just say what they have to say. For good and bad. I'm not advocating for it, I'm just letting you know how it is. And because we think that they're acting just as we are, bluffing, lying, exaggerating, we think, oh, it's fine. They just do what we do. But they don't really. You see, they're generally speaking, whatever they promise you, they will deliver. In good and bad. So, excuse me, we have an article from Sputnik. This is Russian media. So we have the response from Dimitry Medvedev. Ukraine and its allies will receive a devastating response to the possible use of long-range Western weapons on the Russian territory, which will lead to NATO's involvement in the conflict, Russian Security Council Deputy Chairman Dimitry Medvedev said on Friday. Today, and this is a quote, the former Ukraine and its NATO allies will receive a response of such destructive force that the alliance itself will simply not be able to resist being drawn into the conflict. Now, we repeatedly say, oh, we don't want to be a part of the conflict, we're trying to avoid conflict, the Russians are the bad ones, yet we are the ones who keep escalating and escalating. Remember, I've talked in my previous videos, we set red lines for ourselves, no one pushes us to do it, but we do it, and then we keep crossing those red lines, we keep moving the goalpost. The military conflict with the West is developing according to the worst-case scenario. There is a constant escalation of the power of applicable NATO weapons, so no one can exclude the transition of the conflict with the West to its final stage. Now, I'll let you guess what the final stage is. I think we all know what we're talking about, right? It's the mushroom. Western countries that allegedly approve the use of their long-range weapons on Russian territory, regardless of whether we are talking about old or new parts of our country, I think they're talking about the new regions annexed from Ukraine, must clearly understand the following. All their military equipment and specialists fighting against us will be destroyed both on both on the territory of the former Ukraine and on the territory of other countries if attacks are carried out on Russian territory from there. Which means that if, for example, the Polish government, I'm not talking about the Polish people, they're good people, I'm talking about the Polish government, who's absolutely off the rockers, if they use their operators to target infrastructure or whatever military targets inside of Russia, then the Russians will hit them back in Poland. That's what Dimitry Medvedev is saying. You see, I'm not a military expert, I'm not a political expert, but I like to use logic, facts, reason, to make my own determination. So what I do, I read a lot, and based on what I read, using my logic, common sense, I'll try to put 2 and 2 together, and usually 2 plus 2 is 4. If we go back to 1991, Soviet Union, done. NATO promised not to expand. Let's look at the borders. Let's look at what the countries that NATO had incorporated in 1991, and let's look at today. And see, is Russia extending towards the West, or is the West extending towards Russia? Which one is it? It can't be both. We've provoked the war in Georgia in 2008, and then now we're provoking the war with Ukraine. Well, we have already. So this game of breaking Russia apart hasn't really stopped. And now the Ukrainians are paying for it with their lives. And us, we are paying for it with our money. Speaking of paying with our own wallets, I've had a look at an article today. It's from Deutsche Welle, and basically it says that Eurozone inflation is higher in May than they anticipated. Well, I don't know who's making the estimates, but in Europe, I mean, I'm in the UK, life has been pretty rough in the last 2 years. Energy prices have gone up, the grocery prices have gone up, everything is up. Everything is up. The supply chains are still very bad, not in every sector, but in some sectors it's still terrible. So our standard of living isn't getting any higher. In fact, it's getting lower. But then I had an idea. I said, why don't I just look and see what is Germany's GDP forecast for 2024? Are they expected to grow, to go down? What's the situation? And what I found is that the Germans' GDP, the forecast for 2024, is at plus 0.1%. I was like, that's fantastic. Germany used to be it used to be the engine of Europe. That's where the big industry was, the great car manufacturers, steel industry, a lot of those companies have now opened factories and branches in the US. And the reason was very clear. They didn't hide the reason. It was the energy prices. Anyway, that's Germany, right? Russia, on the other hand, their GDP is forecasted to grow by 3.5%. Higher, by the way, than any other country in Europe. So why don't we just stop this nonsense, get to the negotiating table, avoid a conflict with Russia, and get our money back in order, improve our lives, and elect better politicians ultimately. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me tonight. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Please drop me a comment if you have any questions, any feedback. Let's have a conversation, and I'll see you soon. Take care.